Breaking tonight as President Trump prepares for a crucial nuclear showdown in Vietnam. Here he is just a few minutes ago.
And we're going to have, I think, a very interesting 2.5 days in Vietnam. And we have a chance for the total denuclearization of an area of the world that was very dangerous.
And as he gets ready for that, Nancy Pelosi prepares for a border wall showdown in the swamp. Evening, everyone, and welcome to The Next Revolution. I'm Steve Hilton, and this is the home of positive populism, pro-worker, pro-family, pro-community. We are live in New York with Tammy Bruce, Melissa Francis, and Congressman Sean Duffy. We'll bring you the latest on the Democrat challenge to the president's emergency declaration, and we'll be joined live by Ed Henry in Hanoi. Plus, we've got a lot of loony left action for you tonight. My take on how to respond to the growing appeal of socialism, and a truly frightening new statement from loony left leader AOC. And in our 2020 roundup this week, we'll have a live action reenactment of one of the strangest stories of the week. Now, President Obama, he had a pen and a phone. I have a salad and a comb.
Oh, no.
And that is all I'm telling you. You've got to wait and see what we do with that. It's going to be fun. But first, let's get to that upcoming battle over the border wall. Speaker Nancy Pelosi will introduce a motion on Tuesday to overturn the president's emergency declaration. The key questions seem to be, will any Republicans vote for it in the House? And will enough Republicans vote for it so it passes in the Senate? Let's get into all that. With me tonight, Fox News and Fox Business anchor Melissa Francis. It's been a while. So great to see you back on the show.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled.
And Fox News contributor and independent voice, Women's Voice President Tammy Bruce.
Hi, how are you?
And Congressman Sean Duffy from Wisconsin. You were on the other week. We love talking to you about your bill on tariffs.
Reciprocal Trade Act, yeah.
Exactly. I hope we can get time for a quick update on that. But let's get to this border wall situation still ongoing. You've got Nancy Pelosi fighting back. It seems to me that she thinks this is going to be a tactical success. She's going to win the vote in the House to say that the president was wrong to do his emergency declaration. But I think long term, strategically, this could put the Democrats in a box of looking like they're for open borders. What do you make of it?
Spot on. So is anyone surprised that Nancy Pelosi doesn't support border security right now and is anti-Trump? I think the way this is going to play out is it very well will pass the House, right? You might get a few Republicans to break and vote with Democrats. The question is what happens in the Senate? Do we lose 4 Republican senators to vote for this package? But either way, if it does pass the House and the Senate, the president's going to veto it. And we're going to have some ruling by the courts as to whether the president was in his lane for a national emergency. And I think he is, frankly. I mean, the national emergency legislation from 1976 gives wide latitude to the president. I mean, he can take land. He can take means of production. He can declare martial law. I mean, there's a whole slew of things that he can do. I think he's well within his lane to take this action. So,
you hear that from a lot, but I just want to quickly ask you about your colleagues. Privately, are they saying, yeah, we got to support him on this, but we wish he hadn't done this?
So there's a lot of conservatives that say, listen, I think he's overstepped his bounds. I mean, we're very jealous of the separation of powers, and Republicans and Democrats in the Congress want to make sure we preserve our role that we have under the Constitution. And many of us feel that we've ceded too much power to the executive, to the president, whether it's Obama, Trump, or a Bush, a Clinton. And so that becomes a little bit of a backstory. But in the House, for sure, almost all Republicans support securing the border and keeping our people safe.
So, Melissa, where are you on that conservative argument of no matter who the president is, you don't want them just acting like a king?
I think it's absolutely true, but I think the best way for you guys to take your power back is, forgive me, to do your job. I mean, we've been waiting for Congress to reform immigration forever, and it has pushed the president to this point where he must do something extreme. I mean, there were vote after vote for a border fence. The funding was never in place. And so I think that we would love to see Congress take back its power and take back its duty and do what it should. I think the most interesting thing about this conversation is I can't remember the last time I heard Nancy Pelosi or a Democrat talk about the Dreamers. Remember, that's what this was about,
that's people.
Right. We haven't heard Democrats talk about human beings in this for
as in
so long. They
says
could have gotten
for
so
some
much
here in Hanoi.
in exchange
But by the
for anything along the border. But instead, they seem to have forgotten all of those people that they were supposed to be fighting for. And I wonder if those people feel forgotten.
Anyway.
And we'll show them at the ballot box the next time around. Because they're not fighting for them at all.
But that's right. And Tommy, I think that it relates to the earlier point I made about
Jonathan Wachtel,
the
former
politics
colleague
of this,
here at
that
Fox,
in the end,
who's also the former communications director and spokesperson
there's
for
just
the
this
United Nations
ideological
mission to the
obsession
United
now
Nations. Good evening to both of you.
A, doing anything to hurt President Trump, and B, being for open borders.
Jillian, I want to
the establishments work together, interestingly, on both these issues to get nothing done. On both border security and when it comes to the Dreamers. It was one of the first things the president offered them, which made me very uncomfortable. I mean, they actually could work with him, but the difference is that he does want to accomplish it. He wants to do things. Before, we've had several generations now, 40, 60 years of things where you just kind of massage the monster and make sure that it's comfortable and maybe it moves a little bit, but not too much. Donald Trump is in there, and he really wants to do these things, and that's why Melissa's point is excellent in that. We've seen so much not happen with so much talk. It really is an emergency. Look, 2017, 70,000 people dead because of overdoses due to fentanyl and heroin, opioids. That over 80% of which comes through the southern border. 58, we're in Vietnam right now. That is more than all of our fatal casualties in Vietnam for the entire war. Of course, it's an emergency. But I would also say, when it comes to what the president wants to accomplish and what Nancy Pelosi is doing, of course she's going to have the votes in the House. But I welcome this. Let's see where people stand, because remember with Obamacare, of course they passed it. And it decimated them in the next midterms. That's when the Republicans took the House. Because it wasn't what the American people wanted.
Why do you think
New Gallup poll, suburban women coming back to the president,
why not go with the Donald Trump?
They are for border security.
It's a winning issue. I believe that's exactly right. And you've got the evidence. I hadn't seen that.
The Senate, look, Mitch McConnell gets done what he wants to get done in the Senate whenever he wants to do that. Bottom line is, if the president has to veto it, it's even stronger for him.
Can I just make one point?
Yeah, quick last point.
I agree with Melissa. We have to do our job.
How useless you've all been.
Exactly. Okay, very good.
Come on now. It's still a nice Sunday evening here.
Yeah. But one quick point. We mostly agree on immigration reform. And, trying to deal with folks who are in the country unlawfully, who haven't committed crimes, but for coming into the country illegally. The big sticking point is border security. Democrats know that. If you want to get immigration fixed, like Melissa mentioned, you have to secure the border. We learned in 1987 from Reagan, you can't have amnesty today with border security tomorrow.
Yes.
So secure the border. We can take care of
that's
all these
been the
issues.
story all along, but it's never
do it.
But I don't want to do it.
That's why he will prevail. And reform has been the gaslighting term for a generation, and it's over because Trump's the president.
Exactly, and he's clear, doesn't use those kind of weasel words. Just a quick word for you. If you want more detail on the legal background before this debate in the House, before the bill comes up in the House next week, we had a really good discussion on Fox Nation on Deep Dive. So if you're on Fox Nation, go and check that out. Last Mondays that I hosted. If you're not on Fox Nation, why not? Get on with it. But it's really useful about the legal. We had a very smart legal professor from Stanford who explained that the legal justification for what President Trump is doing isn't just the National Emergencies Act. There's a lot more to it. Very interesting. All right. A quick Swamp Watch update for you. Last December, we told you about the horrific story of Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta, who helped protect billionaire hedge fund manager and convicted pedophile monster Jeffrey Epstein with a disgusting, and it now turns out illegal, plea deal when Acosta was U.S. District Attorney in Florida. It's a sickening example of the establishment looking after itself. Anyone who is outraged about the two-tier justice system that let the Clintons off the hook should be equally outraged over this. Yes, it was years ago, and yes, Acosta may be doing a good job now, but Americans voted for President Trump to end all this establishment corruption. There has to be accountability here. Otherwise, it will seem as if nothing has changed. Draining the swamp means dumping Acosta. Well, we're proud to say that our calls to fire Acosta for his involvement in the deal have helped gain the attention of the White House. Sarah Sanders said this week that they're looking into Acosta's role following a federal judge's ruling this week that prosecutors, including Acosta, violated the law when they failed to speak to victims before offering Epstein the plea deal. In response, the Department of Labor has released a statement including the following. For more than a decade, the actions of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida in this case have been defended by... You know what? I can't read this. This is sort of absolute bureaucratic gobbledygook. I can't believe they put that out there. You can read it if you want. There it is on the screen. The point here is that I think it's time for President Trump to find himself a new Labour Secretary. My vote would be for Mike Rowe, although he won't thank me for saying that. But I think that this is far too long. This has been going on, and we need some accountability. All right. Coming up, Ed Henry is live for us from Vietnam with an update on President Trump's summit with Kim Jong-un. Don't go away. There he is.
Last.
Welcome back, everyone. The second meeting between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is set for later this week in Vietnam. So let's go now to Ed Henry, who's there for us live. I don't know, what time of the day is it? Early morning, evening? Are you really alive?
I am really alive. We are 12 hours ahead of you. Steve, I've looked into the future, and things are going to be good for you.
Fantastic. So I hear there's some breaking news connected with China and this summit. What's that all about?
Yeah, obviously China is a critical player. North Korea is not going to move forward in terms of denuclearization without close consultation and coordination with China. President Trump just announced in the last hour or two that he believes they've made great progress in trade talks with China so that, A, he's going to delay tariff increases that were supposed to hit Chinese imports on March 1st. That's going to have a real impact on markets in the days ahead, number one. And number two, the president said that he will now have a summit one-on-one with President Xi of China after this summit with Kim Jong-un in the days ahead, and that will happen at Mar-a-Lago down in Florida. Why is that important? Well, it ties into the nuclear talks, as I mentioned. But I think it's also important to look. You already have people in the mainstream media creating this narrative and saying, President Trump's not going to accomplish anything here. They haven't made any progress. We heard that with China and the tariffs as well. And he stood up to China. He got them to the table. And now we see progress. The same may be happening here, and I underline the word may. We don't know yet. We don't want to get ahead of it. We don't want to be too bullish, but we also don't want to be too pessimistic, as some in the media are. A year and a half ago, when the president was talking about fire and fury, U.S. military power raining down on North Korea if they didn't cut out, these nuclear tests, the missiles that were flying over Japan and elsewhere, critics were saying that the president of the United States was going to push us into nuclear war. Here we are, Steve, a year and a half later. The world is a bit calmer. The president's at the table, the negotiating table for the possibility of peace with North Korea, and he's making progress with China on trade. These are big developments.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're going to discuss that all in a second. But Ed, one last point to you. I was really interested to read that that Kim is traveling to Vietnam in a train, and it's a long journey, 2,500 miles or something like that. But the reason behind it I thought was fascinating, which is that he's keen to see the economic development that's taking place in China as he travels through, and in parts of Vietnam. And to me, that speaks to the kind of central difference, it seems to me, that President Trump is making, which is putting the focus on the economic aspect of this and the chance for economic development and to make money. It's a really different approach. You've got a business guy who's running this from the kind of foreign policy people who wouldn't really have put that emphasis there. How's that playing out?
And you're right. That's the glass half full here. We have to be realistic and clear-eyed that North Korea still has to make concessions in terms of moving towards denuclearization. They haven't done that yet. And the president has been holding firm so far in saying he's not lifting the boot off the neck in terms of economic sanctions against North Korea until they get serious about denuclearization. So that's going to be an important part of Hanoi. But you are right to point out this train ride of Kim Jong-un. So he's going through cities in China, where obviously it's still communist, but there's been some economic reforms, some move towards capitalism. The same here. Vietnam. This is why they're hosting the summit here, Steve, which is that you have a communist nation here, but the economy has been getting better, and people are seeing a bright future here in Vietnam. That might open Kim Jong-un's eyes to the possibility. And if you look at this big picture, 2/3 of the economic growth in the world is happening right here in Asia. This is a big part of the context of these talks, Steve.
All right, Ed, thank you so much. We'll be watching over the next few days. Let's focus on the political aspect. Tammy, it seems to me that if this was any other president, Republican or Democrat, to have achieved this transformation in the relationship from being on the brink of war to an open and friendly dialogue, they would be hailed as a foreign policy genius.
Well, yes, but the other crime that President Trump is committing is, through his success, is he's highlighting how everyone else has failed. That's what, of course, the Democrats have always been afraid of from the start, is that if he is successful, that's why they have to deny the success, because then they would have to explain why they didn't get it. So this is an example of that. And clearly, his approach when it came to, saying, we're going to start war, or we're going to have to stop you this way, it's all part of the package of negotiating. But what I think the president's also been trying to do is trying to kind of pull Kim Jong-un away from China, believing perhaps that America could be a better bet that it could trust. Because right now, really, they can't do anything without China's approval. And that's why the president's trying to weave that in. Because ultimately, you're dealing with, these are not political decisions, really. This is a disturbed entity that has been helping terrorist nations, Al-Qaeda, Iran, from the start. And so it's not a rational actor. That's one of the issues. It's the actor that murdered Otto Warmbier. And this is, for me, heartbreaking that this is still the action we're taking to try to work with them as though they're a rational actor, and they're not.
I'm not entirely sure that's true, because I think that North Korea is motivated, the Kim regime, they're motivated by trying to hold on to power, and that involves money. And all of their money has come from China and these other nations that you name. And the violence has come from trying to hang on to power. And the president, I think, is trying to show him, where you started, that you don't have to be dependent on these other people for money. You could open up the doors and have this other world. What I think is really interesting when you look at the way he's approaching this, and he gets criticized, and oh my gosh, by going there, he's put Kim on this
platform.
Stage,
we keep hearing that.
Or whatever. So in diplomacy, it's more like a Spanish dance where they go forward and backward and they turn to each other and they turn away, whatever. In business, you walk right across the dance floor and you look into the other person's eyes and you shake their hand, and nothing gets done without that relationship and without that face-to-face meeting. That's step number one. So the president can't understand this diplomacy, and diplomats are very uncomfortable. I mean, whether he's saying Rocket Man or he's saying we're in love now, I mean, they're incredibly uncomfortable and critical because this isn't the way it's done. We'll see if it works. I'm not saying it's going to work.
But what makes China nervous, too, is North Korea has been this buffer between America. They don't want America at their border.
I've got to quickly get Sean in because we have to.
So quickly, you look at the left and the hypocrisy. When Obama goes to Cuba and normalizes relationships with the Castros, I mean, the left was celebrating. This was wonderful. And by the way, we got nothing for it. So Donald Trump goes to North Korea, doesn't give them anything. They've stopped shooting missiles over Japan. They're not testing nuclear weapons, and they criticize him for it. I think Donald Trump is brilliant for going to Vietnam to show, listen, you don't have to have democracy to have economic freedom and success. This could be your model.
Well, but Tammy's right. It's showing because he's showing up their failure. That's why.
That's it.
It's a great point.
So it doesn't matter what the success is. It is still only about them and what they haven't done.
All right, coming up, my warning about the loony left's version of populism. Don't go away.
Tonight, with news of Mueller's final report making headlines, Ken Starr shares his thoughts on the probe process.
Just an abysmal misunderstanding of our constitutional order.
On Life, Liberty, and Levin. Every story, every 15 minutes. Fox News Headlines 24/7, Channel 115.
We are living through a historic turning point in American politics. For 50 years, this country was run by an establishment policy agenda shared by both parties in favor of globalization, automation, uncontrolled immigration, and the centralization of government and the economy. In 2016, that consensus was overthrown in a populist revolution. Of course, Donald Trump on the right, but also Bernie Sanders, paving the way for what we see today. The Democrats lurch to the populist left. That is dangerous for America, because the more we see of these new loony left policies, the clearer it is that they'd bring disaster for our economy and society. But it's a danger for Republicans too, because unless they develop a positive populist agenda of their own, they'll just be swept away. That's because on issue after issue, the populist left is responding to people's real concerns. Americans are right to be angry about inequality. If you're part of the globally connected knowledge economy elite, your wealth has soared over the last few decades. But for most working Americans, incomes have been flat or falling since the 1970s. Worse, many millions of responsible Americans who work hard still find themselves in a permanent and precarious state of economic insecurity. For example, a recent Federal Reserve study found that 40% of Americans couldn't afford a $400 emergency expense, like an unexpected medical bill. In response, AOC's Green New Deal, now backed by most leading Democrat presidential candidates, promises high-paying federal jobs to anyone who wants one. Cory Booker has actually introduced a job guarantee bill, claiming it would give all Americans a shot at a day's work and, by introducing competition into the labor market, raise wages and improve benefits for all workers. But the paper that his plan drew from estimated the total annual cost of a federal jobs guarantee to be over $500 billion. It's obvious who'd end up paying for it: the taxpayer, which, of course, is all part of the plan for the loony left populists.
Once you get to like the tippy tops on your $10 millionth dollar, sometimes you see tax rates as high as 60 or 70%.
Tippy tops. Can't get enough of that. All right. Presidential candidate Julian Castro also wants to revoke the Trump tax cuts.
I absolutely would look at undoing the tax cuts that benefited the super wealthy and benefited corporations.
Wake up, Julian. I think you're not going to get the presidency if you're half asleep when you do your interviews. Anyway, Elizabeth Warren, she's planning a new wealth tax. Quote, "We need structural change," she says. "That's why I'm proposing an annual tax on the wealth of the richest Americans." But these taxes are not structural change. They're punitive, not positive. High taxes would actually hurt working Americans by cutting investment, leading to lower growth and fewer jobs. Wealth taxes make the rich poorer. They don't make the poor richer. But here's the key political point. Republicans can't just scream Venezuela about all this loony leftism. You need a positive populist alternative to give working Americans economic security. So instead of higher taxes on the rich, how about lower taxes on workers? Slash payroll taxes and institute a real living wage. It doesn't make any sense that the federal minimum wage hasn't budged in almost 10 years when the cost of living has only continued to rise. But in a broader sense, what the left's version of populism gets wrong about inequality and poverty is the superficial way they approach it. Their plans target the symptoms of poverty. We should be aiming at the underlying causes, and one of the biggest is family breakdown. Census data shows that children living with a divorced single parent are 50% more likely to be living below the poverty line compared to children from two-parent homes. Another study showed that, quote, "the fraction of children living in single-parent households is the strongest negative correlate of upward income mobility." The left lecture us all the time about believing the science on climate change. Well, it's time they stopped denying the science on family. A child starts life at a steep disadvantage if they come from a broken family. The neighborhood they live in, the schools they attend, even the food they eat, these are all factors that impact childhood development and are affected by household income, which plunges if a family breaks up or never gets together in the first place. Here's what the populist left gets wrong about inequality. Americans understand that inequality is the price you pay for opportunity. And they're prepared to pay that price as long as everyone has access to opportunity. But the reason Americans are so angry right now is that the ladder of opportunity has been broken. Conservative populists need to put the rungs back on that ladder to reboot social mobility. That means helping families come together and stay together. But of course, it also means fixing education. In too many parts of the country, our schools are blocking opportunity instead of building it. 2016 figures show that in 1/3 of Baltimore's public high schools, not a single student scored proficient on the state's math exam. Not a single one. Another study found that in Chicago, 1 in 4 African-American students attends a subpar school. Of course, there are many excellent public schools in America, but they're typically the ones serving neighborhoods where families are already doing well. A Stanford study found that the gap in standardized test scores between affluent and low-income students has grown by about 40% between 1960 and 2007. The proven answer to this is to help children escape failing schools by giving their parents real choice. Of course, the public sector unions hate that because it's a threat to their power. But instead of backing opportunity, the loony left populists back the unions who block it. Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, they're all falling over themselves to suck up to their big union donors. What a bunch of hypocrites they are, railing against the rich, then doubling down on the very system that perpetuates inequality in America, the public sector education monopoly. Radical school choice should be the next big crusade for conservative populists. And it's one that has the advantage of being truly popular, with 73% support among Latinos, 68% among whites, and nearly the same with African Americans. But our education system blocks opportunity beyond high school. And once again, left-wing populists have exactly the wrong answer.
We should have free tuition at public colleges and universities. That should be a right of all Americans.
No, I think the word you're looking for, Bernie, is wrong. It's wrong to force every young American at taxpayer expense into a cookie-cutter four-year college program ending in a useless degree that won't lead to a job but will land them with crippling debt. The unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds is over twice the national average, and student loan borrowers owe close to $1.5 trillion. But the left-wing populists strike a chord when they focus on this issue. So conservative populists need a positive answer. It's time for a radical rethink of the whole system. Make it much more open and flexible. Help students focus on their individual strengths. Often that might be a blue-collar career. Quote, the jobs that make civilized life possible, as my guest, Mike Rowe, put it a few weeks ago. Give every American the opportunity to thrive in the economy of the future with ongoing affordable access to skills training from the private sector. Build on the great start made by Ivanka Trump and her National Council for the American Worker. On jobs, on schools, on family, we've seen a decades-long collapse in opportunity. Yes, things have started to turn around, and that's great. But a half-century of establishment rule brought deep problems for working Americans. And the appeal of socialism is no surprise when capitalism failed for so many. That's why it is a huge risk for Republicans to just sit back and hope the loony left populists simply self-destruct. The establishment, it's dead. America's not going back to the corrupt and incompetent never-Trumpers and their swampy counterparts in the Democratic Party. The future is populist. The question is what kind? The negative, vindictive, top-down, centralizing authoritarianism of the left, or a positive, people power version of populism on the right, pro-worker, pro-family, pro-community? Tell me what you think of that at Steve Hilton X and at NextRevFNC. Soon we'll take a look at the populist choice on immigration, healthcare, and much more. Coming up, Sean, Tammy, and Melissa are back with their take on all that and the latest news from the loony left. Don't miss it.
Have a seat, relax in your comfy pants, and enjoy the new way to buy a car at Carvana.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Lots on the menu there from what I just set out. Family, school, jobs, training. Melissa, where would you like to start?
Let me jump in at that education bit, because you are so dead on. We have all these people going off to school and loading up on debt to get a degree in literature. I was at the kitchen and bath industry show this week. They are desperate for workers. And it's not what you think. I mean, it is plumbing, but it's whatever it is you do. You're an artist. You're a computer designer. You want to do programs that are going to bring things to life. You want to, the robots of the future, connecting to the internet, whatever it is, you can have a great paying job at this industry. They are desperate. They have 5 workers every year leave and only 1 comes back in. The problem is the training, and nobody is training anyone for these jobs. Now, these companies are desperate to come in and partner with the schools and train people for the jobs, but there's a lot of hurdles there with government and with getting the whole thing started and knowing how to fit in. Yeah. You have to have a teachers union that's open to it. We see where that goes, but I mean, these are great paying jobs in industry that wants to do the training. We have a labor shortage. Nobody's getting trained for the right job.
I think Melissa's spot on, but in our community, in Wausau, Wisconsin, we need more kids going into manufacturing. And a lot of our manufacturers were looking to government for a solution, to the populist revolution. And it didn't happen. So they took it upon themselves. All the manufacturers got together and they started the heavy metal tour. Right. And they went to high schools and middle schools and got the kids and their parents to go tour the facilities and get kids interested in manufacturing. And they saw more kids going into this field, which was awesome. And it's a private sector partnering with the schools. And the biggest problem they had was counselors that were directing kids away from manufacturing and into a four-year degree. And once they're done, they come back and they get that welding degree that they should have had at the outset. And just one last point on education, and you mentioned so many great things, but we have to stop teaching our kids this crap. Let's teach them useful skills. Let's teach them history and math and science. But there's such a liberal, progressive agenda being pushed on our kids that goes into the middle school.
By the way, we're going to see a bit of in our next topic coming up after the next break in relation to Dianne Feinstein and climate change. So it's exactly that point. Tammy.
Yeah, I think like in your opening, what you noted, of course, is this, what's effectively is class warfare. Instead of conversations about the nuts and bolts about how do we lift people up individual by individual, it's complaints about the super rich and billionaires because it's always for the left for over 100 years. It's about chopping the heads off of the tall poppies. That brings some what they see as equity because it's easier. It's hard work to bring up everyone else. And it's easier to just make it appear as though there's an equality by chopping off those other heads. But what you also have then with class warfare is, of course, a distrust. And it maintains a division in America, which fortunately I think we have resisted because we have a lot more in common than the legacy media and the establishment wants you to think. But that's what they've relied on. Education, as we call it, has facilitated that. They come out hating conservatives, hating Republicans, hating straight white men. All of that is so that you even look at your neighbor or even your family with suspicion. Remember, what was Hillary's main complaint also was that white women were taking the orders of the men in their lives, of their husband or their son. You remember that?
I don't know who these women are she's talking about.
All of this rhetoric, guys, all of this rhetoric has been meant to have women look at the men closest to them with suspicion. All of this, there's a method to their madness, and it's to keep people divided. None of their answers involve the nuts and bolts of really improving individual lives. They will resist it, and it's why the Republicans.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. We've got to go. It's so much to talk about. I really appreciate the conversation. By the way, this is why President Trump is so different, because he's practical. Just looks at practical things.
And why he's
ideology.
Such a threat.
All right, coming up. The loony left is back at it. Senator Dianne Feinstein, as I just mentioned, she was pilloried for her apostasy in questioning the practicality of the Green New Deal to a bunch of rude, brainwashed children. That's my take on them. This week, we'll explain why you should be terrified about that and a new statement from loony left leader AOC. That's after the break. Wait till you see what she has to say.
For 1818.
So I used to quite like the anti-establishment populist Democrats on issues like trade, immigration and draining the swamp. Bernie Sanders was actually pretty close to President Trump a few years ago. But recently, and as we see more and more of their actual policies, it's all gone nuts. Here on The Next Revolution, we call them the loony left, and nothing these days is as loony and polarizing as the Green New Deal. And now kids are getting involved. Take a look at some children and young adults pressuring Senator Dianne Feinstein to support the Green New Deal.
We are trying to ask you to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
Please. Okay, I'll tell you what. We have our own Green New Deal.
Some scientists have said that we have 12 years to turn this around.
Well, it's not going to get turned around in 10 years. What we can do,
Senator, if this doesn't get turned around in 10 years, you're looking at the faces of the people who are going to be living with these consequences.
I'm trying to do the best I can, which was to write a responsible resolution.
Any plan that doesn't take bold, transformative action is not going to be what we need.
Well, you know better than I do. So I think one day you should run for the Senate.
I just thought that was so, like she's getting a ton of grief, Senator Feinstein, for sort of not handling that well. I just thought this was so obnoxious. The using those children as props, the rudeness, the hectoring, the lack of respect. And plus, the kids going in there just going on about the Green New Deal in this uncritical manner. But just before we talk about it, one other thing I want to bring up which really frightened me, same sort of thing, this kind of belligerence now from the left, is this tweet from AOC about the Green New Deal this week. Look at that. If you don't like the Green New Deal, come up with your own proposals. Listen to this phrase. Until then, we're in charge. That's really chilling. It's a sort of authoritarianism to her. And I don't know, I'm really worried about the whole thing.
On the left, first of all, the environment is their religion. because it's replaced God and family and everything else. So you have to understand that, like, you know, this is really the flashpoint on the left. It also is, it's incredible to me that on your populist point, it is so elitist.
Yes,
because
exactly right.
Everything that they're talking about is going to make energy more expensive. Who does that hurt? Not rich people so much. It hurts poor working people. It's terrible. They get rid of jobs all over the place. They're saying it's going to bring out all these other jobs that you need a lot of education and skill for. So it's incredibly elitist, just like when they said at Amazon, those are scrapped jobs. You're like, well, AOC, $150,000 a year might be a scrap to you, but I don't think it was to the people in your district, but you wouldn't know because you're never there and you don't have an office or a phone or any way for anyone to contact you. But
so I've been in those situations where people come and approach you and they don't agree with you. I thought Dianne Feinstein was great. I thought she handled the kids well. She had, I don't know if it was a teacher or the organizer of the kids.
It was an organizer, but I mean, what an example to set to those children, the rudeness.
But interrupting her, right.
Yes.
I mean, so I thought she handled it really well. But, I mean, from my perspective, I look at, I'm rural Wisconsin, so you raise the cost of manufacturing by raising the cost of energy. One, people can't afford, I mean, it's cold there. We just had a polar vortex. They can't afford to heat their houses, but you increase the cost of energy and you start to ship those jobs over to places like China where they have no standards. And if we live on the same planet and breathe the same air and drink the same water, isn't it better that we have the best policies here to manufacture in America instead of making sure that we have policies that close our factories and send them to China or India? This is flat out stupidity from the left, and I think we should call it for that. And by the way, we love cows.
Yeah, we call it loony left. That's why I like that phrase very much.
Cow flagellants, but that gives you cheese and butter and milk.
I'm not sure I want to think about that right now.
Okay. So Tammy, the thing, that's why that tweet, I really, you know, we're in charge. There's something really menacing.
Well, there was another tweet where she said, "I'm the boss."
Yeah.
I mean, there's.
I missed that one.
It's like a 7-year-old at the dinner table, you know, deciding that they're going to make the choices. Yeah. But the larger problem here, too, I think, is in how this Green New Deal has been responded to. You hear about how it's too expensive. But the fact is, the problem is exactly what Melissa was saying, is that it's not too expensive, of course. It will destroy lives. That's the answer. And that should have been, of course, Feinstein's answer in that, look, it is elitist. Everyone's going to have to pay more money. You're not going to have heating oil next year. You know, all of these things that make it a destructive force. That's what has. The moment you skip over what it really is to the cost, you kind of give up to this idea that it's feasible, that you should actually consider it. We should no more actually consider that than if somebody said everybody would have enough money if every now and then everyone robbed a bank. Well, you would not entertain that idea as let's see if we can count up how much money we'd have. No, you would say that's bad. We won't go there. But secondly, with Feinstein, she was also criticized for like being mean to the kids and talking down to them. She's the adult.
Exactly.
She's the adult.
They were so rude.
And she was nice considering.
Exactly right.
But this is a woman who is a mother who knows how to talk to children sometimes. And that's I think Americans see this for what it is. But the argument against this hoax is not to skip past the hoax itself, which presumes it's relevant, but to start picking it apart as being.
Well, we're going to do that very regularly on our Loony Left segment.
Excellent.
We love. Now, here we are. We've got the comb, we got the salad. What could possibly go wrong? Our 2020 update is after the break.
Better stay for this.
On us.
Looks
Don't go away.
There are issues? Let's take care of it.
All right, Bernie Sanders jumped into the presidential race this week. What do we reckon to his chances?
Well, listen, I think he doesn't stand a chance. He's driven the party to the left, but he's too old and he's too white. And his ideas have been taken over by
You're not doing identity politics, are you?
No, but the left is. And I'm calling them out for it. So I think they're going to go with a different candidate, maybe a Kamala. But I definitely
Kamala, you got to get that right.
I think what's fantastic about this is President Trump has made all of these people feel like, oh my gosh, anyone can win this. Look who won last time. Anyone can do it. So for the Democrats, they're all jumping in, but it has to be really exciting because it's like walking into a supermarket and you have every kind of, I won't say fruit, but you have every kind of thing you could possibly choose
but it's all past the expiration date.
Oh, good.
Oh, very nice.
Yes. Everyone running now, though, they actually imagine their futures of being in Hillary Clinton's cabinet and in that administration. So it ruined their entire view for the next 20 years. This is why everyone's suddenly scrambling. But I think for Bernie, It's clearly he won't be the nominee. There are some Democrats now thinking he shouldn't be able to run as within there.
Right.
So that could be.
Well, he isn't a Democrat. Let's be honest.
And maybe he needs a fourth beach house.
He must be really frustrated, though, that he started all this stuff, and now other people are running away with it, and he's not going to be.
As you noted, he's changed, though. It's theater for him too. It's an adjustment, but maybe he wants to see more bread lines, which is what drives him.
Oh, right. Well, listen, we're talking of a nice link to the food portion of the show. So here we are. So I've been very excited about this moment. So why have I got a salad and a comb? The reason is that Amy Klobuchar, who announced last week, the main thing that seems to be coming out about her is what a terrible, mean boss she is and the way she treats her staff with contempt. This is the reenactment. This is what actually happened. She was with a staff member. The staff member was dispatched to go and get her a salad for her lunch. Running through an airport, he dropped the fork. They sat on the plane. She had no utensils. It was a short flight. The airline couldn't give her a fork, whatever. So she pulled out a comb and started doing this and eating. That's where we're going to reenact. This is what really happened. Started eating there we are. Eating the salad with the comb.
Please tell me that was new.
And then she goes to her aide, clean it.
Now that was
what have I gotten myself into here? I don't want this thing.
That's literally.
Right back at you.
What kind of person?
I know you didn't
that?
use that before either, so it's probably very clean, right?
Yes, it reminds me. There's a brilliant line it reminds me of, which is Gore. This is such a sort of jump, but Gore Vidal's brilliant line about the Falklands War. About Britain and Argentina fighting over the Falklands was like two bald men fighting over a comb. So that's my comb quote.
Now, let me say, for her, I'm not a fan of hers, obviously, but I think that was a very MacGyver kind of moment for her. It was either don't eat, eat it with your hands, or find a way to make it work.
But you needed to throw the comb away afterwards.
But the terrible thing is, you like her. Okay, well, she's nice to you. Anyway, all right, there we are. That's all we have time for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to Tammy, Melissa, and Congressman Duffy. Mark Levin is up next. Please join us again next Sunday when the next revolution will be televised.